The best way to predict the future is to invent it. Stephen Ambrose brings you up to speed on what the future holds as he explores the latest technology as it impacts our lives.
Well, good morning and welcome to Tech Talk right here on High FM, where we explore the physical, the metaphysical, the AI, and you name it. Anything to do with technology gets me excited, and hopefully I can share some of that excitement with you, because without one question, technology is fast moving, it is super interesting, and whether we like it or not, there's a lot of retro real stuff happening these days. You cannot ignore the simple fact of how it's reshaping society, it's reshaping what we do day to day, and truthfully, the access to insane amounts of knowledge, well, that power can be misused, but essentially all of us have access via simple to use platforms on our phones, on our computers, through voice, you name it, that allows us to do and know and manage and deal with stuff that seriously took experts and teams of peoples. But as we discussed in previous shows, expertise is not lost, and it's really key that you don't let the dazzle and the shininess of technology detract you from what you really want to do with your life, whether it's become a great ballet dancer, whether it's become a super doctor, lawyer, whatever. Those things continue, those jobs and professions must in and of themselves carry on, because we're people and people need people stuff from other people. So whatever we discuss in the tech world, whatever we do, really is important to contextualize around a simple fact. We're people in a crazy world, and I hope we're all trying to have a little bit of fun. Well, enough of the moralizing. Today we're going to be talking about something that just caught my interest. It sort of plays to something that I love, and that's audio. I love good quality audio, and like tasting fine wine, once you know what's great, it's hard to go back to stuff that isn't. So many mobile phones, many computers become the core of how we listen to music, whether it's a pair of little earbuds or an older pair of around the ear headphones, closed back or open back. There are lots of different variations, or noise cancelling for a plane, whatever it is, listening to music or listening to your favorite TV show that's playing on an iPad or on a computer or even on a big screen if you don't want to disturb the kids, whatever. You need a good pair of headphones, and listening to the sound that comes out of a lot of current technology, it's just good enough. It works, it's clear, it doesn't distort particularly, but it just lacks that joy and energy of the real thing. So today we're going to talk in our sort of app of the week and product of the week. We're going to talk about a tiny little stick-shaped portable, which I think can bring lots of joy. And then we're going to delve into something that I've been following for a long time. And this is something that has not actually worked in South Africa for long. It's just begun. And that is called power wheeling. And power, without power, no gadget. So obviously I follow the power performance of South Africa, which has been pretty good of late. Load shedding doesn't seem to be much of a feature of our current setup, though power failures in and around Joburg due to infrastructure issues certainly has become a challenge. But other than that, the whole question of renewable energy wheeling, we'll discuss that in depth. Then I'm going to close out with some news, some thoughts around some AI choices that South Africa and Africa have to make. And that should be enough to keep your conversation over the weekend dinner table certainly going about what's what and what's not. So we will be back straight after a few words from our sponsors. And then we'll talk about a stick-shaped portable high-res audio player, which is not expensive and yet can bring lots of joy to the sound that you listen to. So Craig will switch us across to one of our sponsors, and we'll be back straight after this.
This is Tech Talk with Stephen Ambrose on 101.9 High FM.
Well, welcome back. And moving into my gadget of the week, it is something called the FIIO, F-I-I-O, Snow Ski Echo Nano. What a cool name. the FiiO Snowski Echo Nano. And what it is, it's a stick-shaped portable high-res audio player. And it's inspired by the look and feel of the early 2000s Sony Network and Walkman design. So it's tiny. It's only about 8 centimeters long. It weighs in at a minuscule 33.5 grams. But internally, and this is the joy of technology, it has a Cirrus Logic, and I'm not going to give you the whole number, a CS43131 DAC. DAC is a digital analog converter for clean, high-resolution sound. Now, the spec of that Cirrus Logic DAC is particularly good. It's used in a lot of higher-end audio and video equipment, and it does an exceptional job of keeping sound clean and easy. It also supports ultra-high resolution sound. So it supports what they call DSD-256 and up to 24-bit 192 kilohertz files. Now, just as an understanding, a CD is a 16-bit 42 kilohertz file. So if you think the CD sound is good, this is orders of magnitude better, because 24-bit isn't just 6 bits better than 16-bit or 8 bits better. My maths is a little off. But it is mega, like 8 to 10 to 12 times better, because every time you increase the bit rate, you're quadrupling the amount of information that's available. And the speed, the 192 kilohertz of the sampling rate, also is exponential. And 84 is not twice as good as a 42. And a 192 isn't 3 times better or 4 times better. It's magnitudes better. So it also takes a micro SD card up to 256 gig, which is a lot, not so much of high-res audio, but it's certainly tons of audio. And it has around about 7 hours of playback in this tiny little thing with battery. Once it's plugged in, it goes forever. And this is where you can actually use it as a USB DAC for a computer or a phone. So you can plug it into your phone and use it as a USB DAC to improve on the phone's performance, or the same thing goes with computers. Now, ultimately, there are some computers with very good DACs. Apple computers, interestingly, and some of the better HPs and Dells use decent quality audio output or DAC for their little 3.5 millimeter audio jack, something that's fading on some of the ultra portables in a spectacular way. But they generally compromise on this. They work well, they have low distortion, and they just deliver sound, but nothing compared to something that you can get out of this little particular Echo Nano device. It comes in all sorts of funky colors: black, white, sky blue, green, pink, and a couple more. And this is where it gets super interesting. If you have a decent pair of headphones, and I'm not talking about some real ultra high end that need a big power supply, because it doesn't have a lot of outputs for 2 reasons. One, the DAC the chip does everything. There aren't separate power amplifiers. And also the power supply is limited. If you want to drive heavy output, you need lots of battery life. And again, through the USB port and its internal battery, it just cannot draw sufficient power to drive a really serious pair of headphones. But for 99% of people where you don't have these heavy, spectacular audio headphones, it is quite remarkable. So you take a pair of Sony XM6000s and you put this little goodie on, the sound quality improvement through a standard either Bluetooth. Bluetooth is okay, but it's compromised. And then you plug it in using the internal cable. And again, there are DACs and all sorts of electronics in the headphones. You can still hear sound improvements. And also when you plug it in to any form of wired in-ear headphone, you definitely get an improvement. Obviously, the cleanest and least processed sound, the most analog sound, is when you use a pair of entirely passive audio headphones, Sennheisers or whatever. And I've tried that a few times with a number of these little plug-in DACs. And the just sheer ease, warmth, and musicality that you get through that is pretty addictive, I must admit. And I mean, it definitely gives you the sense of the older, warm, turntable-led audio that, I grew up with. Certainly not many people have heard it these days, but certainly there is a beauty in true analog audio. And this little device brings the sound a lot closer. And I digressed a little, but what I was talking about is the price. It's available somewhere between 800 and 1,000 Rand, depending on the Rand. Unfortunately, the Rand is not exactly your best friend currently. But you can get it on a number of platforms. I've seen it on Amazon. I've seen it on AliExpress. I've seen it around. It's not generally available in stores, but without very much effort, because it's so tiny, you just order it and get sent to you in the mail or wherever. It is really well worth looking at something if you're interested in some pure enjoyment that really is unaffected by the sheer digital nature of where music comes from. It certainly smooths things out, makes it sound a little bit more analog and a lot warmer and more musical and easy. Now, that's a hard thing to explain over the radio, but generally, if something is smooth and easy and nice to listen to, you find that subliminally you just relax and you tend to enjoy it more. The sound involves you better, and it's just great. And it definitely allows you to escape some of the phone notifications and enjoy music, podcasts, audiobooks, or whatever it is that you listen to in a much better way through simple, it's not earbuds, not anything that's wired that works through the audio system. It really does make a big difference. And I think it's well worth investigating. There are better ones out there that I've seen and heard. They are much more expensive. But an external DAC, certainly, if you're worried or concerned or really want to have a better quality of sound out of a tiny little phone, laptop, or whatever it is, these external DACs take a digital signal, which theoretically is a digital signal. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about how you can improve the digital signal. But generally, the error correction that's built in, a negative is a negative, a 1 is a 1, a 0 is a 0. And if they get put back together in a reasonably efficient way, they will remain 0s and 1s, and they should be able to feed the DAC and allow it to decode the signal the way it was put in. Again, lots of argument about the quality of digital, but let's not get there. We're talking all about audio. If you've got audio and you really want a much warmer, more musical, harking back to the analog days, output from your digital sources, then this little gizmo, the Theo Snowski, you just need to search for that, Echo Nano, does a remarkable job considering its cost and considering its size.
This is Tech Talk with Stephen Ambrose on 101.9 High FM.
Well, welcome back. And our deep topic today really is all about open access and open access energy. Now, the structure to this and what most of us don't even think about, and something that I didn't follow particularly, except for two things. One, we're moving into a self-generation era. The days of massive grid-based power is not coming to an end, but I think it's ultimately reshaping and changing in significant ways. South Africa, sadly, because of the sheer inefficiency and problems that happened over the last 10, 15, 20 years with Eskom, resulted in Makaplan mentality for many South Africans. And this is not just talking about putting some solar panels on the roof with an inverter in the garage and a couple of batteries so that you can watch your favorite TV show or stay connected to the internet while the main power goes out. There's tons of that. We're talking about 7-8 gigawatts of power through solar generation across South Africa as a survival mechanism. This is both businesses and people. It is bigger than some of our major power stations in total. However, it depends on one thing and one thing alone: sun, light, and the ability to store enough in the dark periods to keep you going through the cold winters or the hot summers using your air conditioner or whatever. And a backbone of pure power is still necessary. So there are two components to any power in any system. One is the generation. These massive Medupis and Kusiles and you name it, they're coal-fired power stations that pump out a steady megawatt of power or megawatts of power, tons of power, something like 20, 30 gigawatts go out every day into a network of cables that connect across South Africa. And pretty much if you're in any vaguely urban areas, even some of the peri-urban and rural areas, and certainly if you're a manufacturer or a big company or a power plant or a metal manufacturing, anything that uses tons of energy, you connect up to this solid back end and you can use power in a very consistent way. Using solar as a backup, although it's got a lot better and the battery power ability to keep sufficient storage of power, because you use it or lose it from a power generator. If those generators pump out the power, it either gets used or it gets lost in heat or whatever, or they dump it or whatever the case is. You generally can't store what comes out of the grid. Now, this leads to exactly where this is going. Basically, we sit in a situation where we've got tons of generating power happening in the daylight hours across tons of businesses. Companies are building their own power plants to self-supply. And at the same time, they may actually have excess power. Because here's the rub. All of us generally leave the home during the day. We switch off the lights. We're not cooking anything. We might have a TV or two on, some small electronics. Our demand during the day drops dramatically. And then comes the evening when it's cold, we're all home, we're cooking, you're doing whatever you're doing. It spikes up dramatically. Again, batteries can help. But generally, you use the grid for that and you connect across the network. Now, but at the same time, you go to the office, you go to your work, you go to places where you start using lots of power, air conditioning to keep you cool, machinery to make whatever you make. So the demand drops in the networks have always known this. Demand drops in the urban areas and rises in the business areas, and it tends to average out over a period. Now, take the scenario where you have a company, you put in your own power supplies, you've stored the energy, and you've got spare at night. What do you do with it? Do you keep it till the next day and use it then? Which is fine. But what if you could sell that energy across the existing network for a reasonable amount and allow another user to use that excess energy? And that way you add all of this power to the network grid, which suddenly creates much better redundancy, much better usage, and an efficient way for you to make some money out of the power that your excess energy that you generate. The methodology of doing this is something that's called wheeling. And by wheeling, it means you create the energy, you send it across the network, and another user uses it. But how does this happen? And how is it managed? How do you know that your power, because there's not a separate line, 220 volts is 220 volts, whether it comes from Mr. A or Mr. B or Kusile C, who cares? It's power. But this is where it gets super interesting. A Cape Town-based startup called Open Access Energy, and this is genius, has built a digital platform. Now, these exist around the world because this type of thing I was talking about does exist around the world, but this is local. It's built with local conditions in mind, the needs of the municipalities, the needs of Eskom, the needs of users. And although the legislation recently in 2021, 2022, they allowed this sort of open access power, it still has specific needs. Anyway, this company has built a digital platform that makes energy wheeling simpler and a lot more transparent. And this wheeling process is how you send privately generated renewable power from solar farms or whatever the producers are across the existing public grid to businesses or other users. And it's a pure software-driven solution. And this software, which they've called Energy Pro, automates metering, forecasting, risk management, and most important, the financial side, the settlement of the power, so that generation and consumption can be matched in pretty close to near real time. So what happened recently is the company closed a seeding fund round of $1.8 million, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it's a lot of rands, with a participation of E3 Capital, which is part of Signum Capital.
And they're going to use this to scale the platform and support more independent power producers because, again, legislation has changed and you theoretically can create an independent power producer and start supplying the grid. And generally, because of the efficiency of these type of power plants, because of the efficiency in certain areas of geothermal power, the day of using of the only source of electricity being grid-tied, back-end, solid corporate power producers from these big megawatt plants is slowly fading back into a much more decentralized setup where you can have micro generators in an area at a building generating sufficient power just for that organization and a little bit more of the community. So there's no question that the more distributed generation becomes, the costs, one, become far cheaper, and the cost of maintenance, managing a massive coal-fired station drops down to way lower prices. And the sheer resilience of having multiple suppliers of power across multiple different generators. And many places in Europe, for example, you can buy only wind-generated power. That's it. Or you can specify at a certain time at night where you only want to use that power for, or the network power for heavy duty stuff. I don't know, running your washing machine at home or your pool, or whatever it is your business uses. You can actually choose it. And it's wheeling platforms such as this one, and you can check them out, interesting if you want to know more about it, at openaccess.energy. That's quite an interesting URL. So .energy, openaccess.energy, you'll get all the details there. But simply put, this money would definitely allow private generators, and it actually addresses a real bottleneck where power is being generated and lost, and matching it efficiently with demand through the grid, which has been super complicated and super slow. Something Eskom should have climbed on years ago, but they're too busy just getting their house in order. And yes, kudos, their efficiency slowly rising close to 80%, which it hasn't been for years and years and years. That means the power generators are running better than they ever had. But this is where it really matters. Ordinary South Africans with businesses, with homes, can lock in with these wheeling tools to a more predictable and often cheaper renewable electricity. This reduces pressure on the national system, and it supports the broader shift away from coal. So I'm all for efficiency. I'm not the biggest greenie in the world, and I don't believe that climate change is the apocalyptic thing. This is just personal. Please don't take me up on this and send me rude emails about my inability to understand the green revolution. I believe that efficiency and cost and decentralized resilience makes a huge way forward. And with the drop in cost of and the increase in efficiency of solar panels into the 30 to 40% range, growing steadily, it's just becoming a no-brainer. Why burn coal or gas or fuel or whatever if you don't have to? It's cheaper to just stick the panels outside, let them pick up the sun, and store it in a reasonably cost-effective battery if needed, or use it as and when you want. So a wheeling system, or the electronic system such as what Open Access is designing, becomes perfect for this. It's not ideal for one-on-one users, but it definitely is going to help companies and businesses to land up with a more predictable and supply of power. Definitely they must be grid tied, so it doesn't take Eskom out of the loop. And it certainly takes the pressure away from building these mega complicated, massive power stations, which in the case of Kusile and Medupi and those guys went 300-500% above budget, and really only has started coming into its own 10-15 years after they were envisaged, which is typical of any governmental sort of system. The point of being efficient and cost effective is definitely not number one on the list of any government agency. So this platform generally brings an enormous amount of benefit to most people. And from the point of view of power stations, it will take the pressure off government to generate the money and take the costs of either creating brand new or completely refurbishing and extending the power, which will allow power and allow the economy to grow. Because the growing economy needs power. The more the economy grows, the more power it will use, the more houses move up market, the more power they're going to use, the more gadgets they're going to buy, the more utilities they'll use. And this makes a huge difference. And where the one other element which they don't address, because this is not entirely their market, but I think it will come logically, is it already exists in some ways in Cape Town. Hopefully we'll come to Joburg soon. If you have a solar powered system, it would be brilliant if you could connect it into the grid system and with your municipality work out a way that you get a fair return on your investment. In other words, if you're generating a couple of gigawatts a month or whatever, or megawatts, whatever it is, if you're generating electricity every day and it's being used by other people across the network in a cost-effective and organized way, and you get paid for that electricity at a market-related rate, you could save anywhere up to 40 to 50% of your cost of your electricity costs on the one end, and the other end, by putting in the system, you can pay it off in a much quicker period, and it can certainly save you a lot of money. Now, imagine Eskom or Joburg Power, or whoever it is that you buy your power from, suddenly owes you money. So you're paying 10,000 a month and you're getting 5,000 back because you're supplying excess energy during the day to businesses in the area, or anywhere for that matter, that decide to use some free solar power, not free to use solar power at a 30% discount to what they're paying elsewhere. Again, the municipality, if it's done right, can make some money out of this because it generally creates a marketplace on which they can buy it from you for one price and sell it to someone else. And that's what this open access energy platform, software platform does. It creates the ability to have very complicated municipal systems where they can have multiple types of power generation things and all sorts of other elements and ways of moving the power around. So globally, these platforms are appearing as countries liberalize energy markets and add more distributed renewables. So hopefully, and I mean kudos to open access energy, is they have tailored it to local rules, municipal involvement, and the sheer realities of our grid. It is pretty much good overall. The infrastructure in South Africa for the main grid, the wires that connect you to the power supply, are pretty good. The maintenance has improved. And again, it harks back to what Eskom are trying to do. They're trying to create a generation unit, which makes the power, and a distribution unit as a separate company that buys power from anywhere, including you, private industry, whoever's generating that power, and sell it in a cost-effective way to users across the country. Now, this solution doesn't sidestep that, but I think that Eskom have got enough problems just with running the business they have. And this solution, by being not a power producer, not a power distributor, but simply the software that makes both of those things usable across the widest possible base, is just absolutely genius. So you can read a lot more about this on the Open Access Energy website, as I told you. I hope there's a couple of people in the municipality listening to this, because I think setting up a system like that, there is so much home solar power generation in South Africa, and many, many companies are now pushing hard for back to work. So you're landing up leaving home in the morning, turning off everything, and having your solar system just generally creating power, which you can only store so much, and then it switches off because you don't have endless batteries in the garage, wherever it is that you keep your solar power setup. But it would be amazing if you could just simply add to the network of power that's out there and generally allow it to happen at a cost-effective rate for buyers and a certainly profitable rate for sellers such as yourself. And with this round of funding, they plan to expand the product features in many directions, and one of them is definitely for consumers. And making it more flexible and making it more available for consumers. So you could go home and decide today, you've got a big party coming. You don't want to take the chance on solar power. You want to use straight coal grid-tied power. You can do that. You can simply go to a simple interface on the web, on your phone, or on the in-house unit that gives you all the data you need to either be paid or to pay. And it makes a huge difference when you've got control over what power you want to use when, and the costs of that power. Now, I don't want to add more work to a generally busy workload in a day, but so much of this can be automated and set up in a way using any one of the tools on the market to change any setup that you have. So in the winter months, you tend to want absolute reliability because you're using tons of heaters. You can use one power source. In the summer months, where your own battery backup is more than good enough for lights and TV and the usual fridges and whatnot, you can set it up another, and you can make it dynamic. If the draw is reaching a certain limit, you can simply say, if it reaches 100 kilowatts in a day, switch across to that or switch across to this. Or if for whatever reason there's a massive oversupply, it's holidays and the big power user in the area has gone down and now power becomes dynamically much cheaper, you can actually tap into that as 100% usage. So again, all of that, and I've seen some demonstrations about smart homes from Samsung that do precisely that. It figures out the lowest cost. It looks at your usage, when you do the washing, when you use heaters, when you use air conditioning, etc., and figures out for you the cheapest possible way to power all that stuff. And that starts sounding like a revolution. I mean, we've all got used to a simple fact in Johannesburg and South Africa, and anywhere in the world. Power is power. You buy it, you use it, and you pay the bill. Imagine being far more involved, having the tools and being able to decide how much power you use, where you use it from where, and how best to manage your access as a business. And I mean, there's some case studies where businesses have saved millions over a year to using the correct power mix. And on that note, we've got a quick live read, and then we're going to have a quick break for our sponsors. And 18 years ago, Chai FM went on air. I cannot believe it's 18 years ago. As it so happens, I think this is my bar mitzvah year. I think it's 13 years of Chai FM and Tech Talk. So how's that for a good one? But on that note, Chai FM went on air with a promise to be this community's voice. And we're still keeping it more than ever. New live shows, broadcasts from community events, so many voices on air telling their own stories. All that runs through the same gear that carried the station for 18 years. It's earned an upgrade. That's Amplify Chai FM, our campaign to modernize how you hear us. I know a lot of you stream, but FM equipment is not the cheapest.
This is Tech Talk with Stephen Ambrose on 101.9 Chai FM.
Well, welcome back. And some news of the week. It's actually surprisingly been quite a busy week out there. So many things are happening. One interesting and problematic piece of news that came across my desk and I noticed this week is that the National Credit Regulator and the payment distribution for FNB were hit by a data breach, a significant one. Basically, the South African Payment Facilitator and Debt Clearinghouse, called DC Partner, confirmed that it was a victim of a ransomware attack after a threat actor, Crybit, listed them on the dark web. And this is pretty interesting. Private data belonging to DC Partners was allegedly leaked online, and this Crybit crowd have claimed responsibility on hundreds of organizations worldwide. Well, their business is hacking into people, locking up their system. Ransomware means you enter a code, and to get that code, you're going to pay us many, many, many millions or whatever it is. So this company, which not a lot of people know about because they operate pretty much in the wholesale back-end company-to-bank market, and there are not that many banks out there. It distributes payments to people who are in debt to various banks and credit providers according to plans drawn up by debt counselors. So DC Partners distribution system has tons of information of tons of people, and for them to be locked up and to be in this sort of situation, it's pretty problematic. They work with FNB and all the big banks in order to do it. Now, DebiCheck is one of their things. It's a debit order system that requires approval from bank accounts before a company or financial service can automatically withdraw funds with the debit order. It was also part of this. So let's watch this space. Unfortunately, this Crybit has been operating for ages and has been quickly become pretty notorious amongst these cyber extortion groups to create problems. So there's going to be, unfortunately, more and more of this. As we've discussed on the show many, many times, cybersecurity is pretty insane. I mean, this Crybit usually demands ransoms between $40,000 and $100,000 US. So that is like 800,000 to 8 million rand. It's absolutely insane. And it really seems to have no qualms who they hit. They hit educational institutes for children, they've hit anyone. They lock up your data and they make you pay a ransom to get it back. Now, if you have a good disaster recovery plan, you've got a fully online backup that's as up to date as it can be, and you simply delete your system, improve the security, otherwise you put the old system back and they'll just lock it again because they have access. And you carry on working, or you pay the ransom and you get your data, because no business that's been running, and certainly a business that has hundreds and thousands of bits of data and customers and suppliers and whatnot, can afford to not have their system. They're basically shut from that section. Now, Papier does insist that these companies tell their users what's happening, which happens sometimes, not always, but most times it seems to happen. But watch out and make sure that you have proper cybersecurity, and not only cybersecurity to prevent this happening, but you have disaster recovery, backup, and a plan that if it does happen, your business does not shut down unless you pay stupid amounts of money to get your data back and get your system unlocked. And then you're still going to spend the money on the cybersecurity, and you're still going to spend the money on all the other systems you need in order to make sure it doesn't happen again. So it's a double whammy. It's much better. And I mean, I know cybersecurity and many of these platforms feels like insurance. You pay a hefty price so that you may need it down the road. But the simple fact is that the crime of this generation, the crime of this century, is online. They are not going to come and whack you on the head to steal your money in your pocket, because it's your credit card and that has limits and it's not so simple. But if you're going to get in some way extorted or to try to get money out of you, it's going to be done electronically. So you simply have to, in a business, even in your personal life, take all the necessary steps to keep your data and yourself safe. Your bank accounts, there's just endless tales of people being hacked or phished or somehow psychologically manipulated to get into their bank accounts, and people lose money. But businesses across the spectrum, from small ones to massive global players, have had situations where their data has been stolen, sold, or ransomware created and locked so that they cannot continue trading. And it's huge business. As smart as these companies get to prevent it, the same tools, the same AI, the same smart systems is used to block it. So don't be complacent. I know it can cost a lot of money, but it is absolutely your lifeline. It's a cost of doing business today in the modern world. The convenience you get through tech and communication is fantastic, but the cost of that convenience is to have cybersecurity platforms that make sure that people can't get in, and processes that, if in the unlikely event they do get in, you can recover and continue business with as minimal amount of disruption as you possibly can. And again, that's a story for a whole nother thing, but it's well worth knowing that you need to be protected on both levels at all times. Now, enough of that fear-mongering and whatnot. We move on to something that's quite cool, ABSA and Home Affairs, and there seems to be a massive push from Home Affairs to digitalize and get things going. But they've expanded their smart ID services. So they've created a lot more bank and app-based applications and biometrics so that they can get out to more people with their IDs. And they've even got a mobile setup, which they can take into the most rural areas and do all the necessary to do the IDs. So it really is making a lot of sense. It makes so much sense to do this because, today, without your ID, you can't do a lot. And being able to replace and update ID documents without long queues and standing at 5 a.m. at Home Affairs and just getting to the gate at 2 a.m. and 2 p.m. and they tell you, sorry, our quota for the day's used up, and then you have to start again. It's just so inefficient in this crazy world of technology when it exists. And kudos to Home Affairs for getting this going. All the banks now, ABSA, all the banks offer the service, and I think it's well worth having. Now,
This is Tech Talk with Stephen Ambrose on 101.9 High FM.
Well, welcome back. And to wrap up our show today, time flies when you're talking tech. We started off with a music player, something that made music better and made it easier. But you still need an app or something on your phone, on your laptop to do so. Now, a lot of the built-in apps are good. They certainly play the music. But there are apps that are free online, such as VLC. You should certainly try that, or simple file-based players that lets you download tracks or podcasts once on Wi-Fi and listen later without using data or worrying about signal or whatever it is that you do. And you pair it up with a small dedicated player like the Echo Nano if you want even cleaner sound and fewer distractions. So definitely, if you're looking to try something that's cleaner, easier, and simpler, just look for VLC or there are a number of really cool, I'm not even going to do that. Just look for music players in the App Store, both Google and Apple, or in the Windows App Store, wherever, on your laptop, and you can download a lot of them. They all have very similar features. They're all fairly neutral with regard to quality. In other words, they'll play the file in the manner. A lot of them will say FLAC, which is the uncompressed, all the way to MP3s, which is highly compressed in different levels. MP3 sounds the worst. FLAC generally sounds the best, but again, the higher the sampling rate of the actual source music, the better. If it's CD, it'll be as good as CD. If it's beyond CD, 96K or above, or high resolution, it'll sound even better. And using these third-party apps, things like Roon and many others, allows you to store music, stream it in different ways. So it's really well worth having a look and getting a free offline music player, because often you don't want to use up your data just listening to music all day, and you want to listen at the highest, because what a lot of cell phones do is they allow you to use low quality when you're on mobile and high quality when you're on Wi-Fi. And by default, most of them are set that way. So you don't use max amount of data when you're listening to music through streaming. But if you can download playlists, albums, whatever you listen to onto your device directly using an offline player such as VLC, you certainly can save a lot of time if you're traveling and you don't want to worry about having it connected on planes, wherever it is, or trains, and there's no connectivity in some places, underground or under tunnels. You just listen to your music with no problem. So it's a much smarter way to listen to your music than simply using the player that's built into the phone or streaming it through Spotify or one of the others. I mean, those remain exceptional sources of music and do allow you to download. But if you don't want to pay for those programs, then there are lots of ways to do it in a simple and inexpensive way. And on that note, I think we're going to be told it's time to wrap up. And so from better sounding music on the go to smarter ways of moving clean energy and easier access to documents, etc., technology really does continue to offer practical tools for all of us. It keeps us on our toes with regards to what's going on. The next couple of weeks are going to be pretty interesting because August is almost into the first part of August, and September is always a huge month. It's pre-Christmas, it's pre-holiday season, and the technology world goes mad, because I think 2/3 of their turnover happens over the last part of the year. And certainly Samsung have launched their new range of phones, the Folds, in the last few weeks. They'll be shipped shortly. I think a lot of people, the initial reports are exceptionally good. And next month, within a month, give or take, Apple are going to announce the new iPhone 18 and 18 range, which as usual turns into a bit of a craziness with people trying to get the latest and greatest. So the year is going to be heavily loaded with tech in the next couple of weeks. And then the big international shows start off the new year. So 2016 certainly has been a incredibly interesting year from the point of view of both hardware and software, the scope and scale of AI and how it's changed so much of everything. Again, a topic for another show, because you can talk AI ad nauseum. But in general, we are sitting in a place where the combination of smart software, increasingly better quality and easier and more accessible hardware is definitely making the choices even greater for all of us. So stay tuned. The point of all that is very simple. Stay tuned to Tech Talk. I'll try to make all these crazy developments as consumable as possible so you can understand what the benefits are, and certainly try to unpack and explain and go around some of the sort of hype that unfortunately always seems to, be created around the latest new fancy shiny new toy or the greatest new platform or whatnot is going on out there. So on that note, this is Stephen Ambrose on Tech Talk right here on High FM, calling it a day for this week. And we will be back same place, same time on the radio, where you love to listen to all the good news and all the good interesting shows. This is Stephen Ambrose for Tech Talk right here on High FM.